You have a folder on your computer. Maybe it's called Strategies or Systems or Setups. And inside that folder, there are files. Lots of them. Screenshots of chart patterns, notes from videos you watched, indicators you saved, different approaches for different market conditions. And every time you sit down to trade, you open that folder and you feel something that you probably don't talk about with anyone. You feel lost. Not because you don't have enough information, because you have too much. And somewhere, buried under all those strategies and all those options and all those possibilities, there's a question you're afraid to ask yourself. If I had everything I needed, why do I keep looking for more? This isn't a video about which strategy is best. It's about why you keep searching for the next one. Why you collect approaches like they're going to save you, why you feel like you need a different tool for every possible market situation, and what happens inside you when you finally stop searching and commit to just one way of doing this. I want to talk to you about why you only need one trading strategy. Not because other strategies don't work. Not because there's only one right way to trade, but because the act of constantly switching between strategies is preventing you from ever mastering any of them. And more importantly, it's masking a deeper issue that has nothing to do with the market and everything to do with what's happening inside you. Let me start with something you'd probably recognize. You learn a new strategy. Maybe you take a course, or watch a series of videos, or study a particular approach that seems logical and clear. You practice it. You backtest it. You convince yourself this is the one, and then you start trading it with real money. And for a while, maybe it works. You have some wins. You feel confident. But then something shifts. You hit a losing streak, or the market conditions change. Or you have a few trades that just feel wrong, and suddenly, that strategy you were so sure about starts to feel inadequate. You begin to notice its flaws, the signals that come too late, the times it gets chopped up in sideways markets, the trades that would have worked better if you'd used a different entry method. And slowly, quietly, a new thought enters your mind. Maybe this strategy isn't as good as I thought. Maybe I need something better. Something more complete. And before you know it, you're back in that folder. This cycle is so common that most traders think it's just part of the learning process. They think they're being diligent, adaptive, smart. They're trying to find the best tool for the job. But what they don't realize is that they're not actually searching for a better strategy. They're searching for a strategy that never loses. And that search is endless because that strategy doesn't exist. Here's what's really happening. Every trading strategy, no matter how well designed, will go through periods where it doesn't work well. That's not a flaw in the strategy. That's the nature of markets. Markets cycle through different conditions: trending, ranging, volatile, quiet. No single approach captures every move perfectly. And when your strategy hits a rough patch, that's not evidence that it's broken. It's evidence that markets are doing what they always do. But in those moments, when you're watching your equity curve flatten or dip, something happens. Emotionally, you start to doubt. Not just the strategy, but yourself. You wonder if you chose wrong. If you missed something. If other traders are winning while you're stuck with a method that isn't working right now. And that doubt is uncomfortable. It sits in your chest. It whispers to you during trades. It makes you second-guess every entry. And here's where the real problem begins. Instead of sitting with that discomfort, instead of trusting that this rough patch is temporary and normal, you look for relief. And the easiest relief is to convince yourself that the problem isn't you or your patience or your trust in the process. The problem is the strategy. And if the strategy is the problem, then the solution is simple. Find a new one. This gives you something to do. It gives you a sense of control. It feels productive. You're not just sitting. They're losing. You're researching. You're learning. You're improving. But what you're actually doing is avoiding the emotional work of staying committed when things aren't going well. You're trading one form of discomfort, the discomfort of doubt, for another form of discomfort that feels more manageable, the discomfort of starting over. And the cruel irony is that starting over feels like progress, but it's actually keeping you in the same place, because you never stay with any strategy long enough to move through its natural cycles. You never develop the deep familiarity that comes from seeing the same setups in different market conditions. You never build the trust that comes from watching your strategy recover after a drawdown. You just keep resetting. And every time you reset, you're back at the beginning, full of hope and confidence, convinced that this time it will be different. But it's never different, because the problem was never the strategy. The problem is your relationship with uncertainty, your inability to tolerate the feeling of not knowing whether this rough patch will end tomorrow or next month, your need for constant confirmation that you're on the right path, and no strategy, no matter how good, can give you that. The market doesn't work that way. Now, you might be thinking, but what if I really did choose the wrong strategy? What if mine genuinely doesn't have an edge? And that's a fair question. But here's what I've observed in years of working with traders. The traders who keep switching strategies rarely switch because they've thoroughly tested something and discovered it has no edge. They switch because they're in emotional pain and they want relief. They switch after a bad week or a bad trade or a moment of comparison where they saw someone else making money a different way. If you've done genuine research, if you've backtested something over hundreds of trades across different market conditions, if you've verified that it has a positive expectancy, then you have enough. You have a viable strategy. The question isn't whether it's good enough. The question is whether you're willing to stay with it through the inevitable periods where it doesn't feel good. And this is where most traders fail, not because they lack knowledge, not because they can't find a working strategy, but because they can't handle the emotional experience of watching their strategy underperform while other approaches seem to be working. They can't tolerate the feeling that they might be missing out, that they might have chosen wrong, that they're on the sidelines while others are winning. And so they switch again and again, never realizing that the switching itself is the problem. Let me tell you what happens when you commit to one strategy. Really commit, not just saying you will, but actually staying with it through the good periods and the rough patches. Something starts to shift in you. At first, it's subtle. You begin to notice things you didn't see before, nuances in your setups, small variations that matter. You start to develop a feel for when conditions are optimal and when they're marginal. You learn to read the context around your signals, not just the signals themselves. This kind of knowledge doesn't come from studying. It comes from repetition, from seeing the same pattern play out dozens of times in slightly different circumstances, from making mistakes and learning where your strategy is forgiving and where it's not, from watching it fail in ways that teach you something and succeed in ways that build your confidence. This is mastery. And mastery only happens when you stop searching and start deepening. But there's something else that happens too. Something even more important. You start to trust yourself, not because you're winning every trade, but because you're keeping your word to yourself. You said you would trade this way, and you're trading this way. You said you would stick with it, and you're sticking with it. And every time you honor that commitment, especially when it's hard, you're building something that no strategy can give you. You're building self-trust. This is what most traders don't understand. They think trust comes from winning. They think if they can just find the right strategy and rack up enough wins, they'll finally trust themselves. But it doesn't work that way. Trust comes from integrity, from doing what you said you would do, even when you don't feel like it, even when it's not working perfectly, even when there is a shiny new approach that looks more appealing. And when you have that trust, everything changes. You stop second-guessing your entries. You stop wondering if you should be trading a different way. You stop feeling that low-level anxiety that comes from never being sure if you're on the right path. You just trade. You see your setup. You execute. You manage it according to your rules, and you move on. There's a simplicity to it that feels almost boring compared to the drama of constantly searching for something better. But that boring simplicity is where edge lives, because while you're calmly executing your one strategy, other traders are switching between approaches, getting whipsawed by their own indecision, entering trades they don't fully understand because they're still in the learning phase of their newest system. They're distracted, scattered, and you're focused, clear. You know exactly what you're looking for and exactly what you're going to do when you see it. There's also something freeing about only needing one strategy. You stop consuming so much information. You don't need to watch every trading video or join every course or study every new indicator. You already have what you need. Your job now isn't to find more. It's to execute better. 2. Refine your psychology to eliminate the small errors that come from emotional reactions. And this focus allows you to improve in ways that actually matter. Think about any skill you've ever developed to a high level. Maybe a sport, or an instrument, or a craft. You didn't get good by constantly switching methods. You got good by doing the same thing over and over, making tiny adjustments, deepening your understanding. Building muscle memory. Trading is not different. Mastery comes from depth, not breadth. From knowing one thing extremely well rather than knowing many things superficially. But here's what stops most traders from committing to one strategy. It's not that they don't understand this principle intellectually. It's that committing to one thing means giving up the fantasy that there's a perfect strategy out there that will make trading easy, and letting go of that fantasy is painful. Because as long as you're searching, you can maintain hope. You can tell yourself that you just haven't found it yet. But once you commit, once you say, this is what I'm doing, and I'm not looking for anything else, you have to face reality. You have to accept that trading will never be easy, that even your chosen strategy will have hard days and losing streaks and moments of doubt, and that you're going to have to be okay with that. This is the real reason traders keep switching, not because strategies keep failing them, but because they're trying to avoid accepting the fundamental uncertainty of this profession. They're trying to find a method that eliminates risk or guaranteed success, or makes them feel confident all the time. And when they discover that their current strategy can't do that, they assume the problem is the strategy. So they move to the next one, and the cycle continues. The truth is, you could spend your entire career searching for the perfect strategy and never find it, because you're searching for something that doesn't exist. Or you could take a viable strategy, one that has a demonstrated edge, and commit to it completely, not because it's perfect, but because committing to something imperfect and making it work is what professional trading actually looks like. Let me be clear about what I'm not saying. I'm not saying you should never change your strategy. If you discover through rigorous testing that your approach genuinely has no edge, then yes, you need to find something different. And I'm not saying you can't evolve your strategy over time. As you gain experience, you might refine your rules, adjust your risk management, or improve your execution. That's natural. Growth. What I'm saying is that the constant searching, the endless collection of new methods, the switching every time you hit a rough patch, that has to stop, because it's not helping you become a better trader. It's keeping you stuck in a cycle of hope and disappointment that prevents you from ever developing real expertise. And here's something that might surprise you. The strategy itself matters less than you think. Yes, you need something with a genuine edge. But beyond that, what matters most is your consistency in applying it. A simple strategy executed with discipline will outperform a sophisticated strategy executed inconsistently every single time. The market doesn't reward complexity. It rewards consistency. So when I say you only need one trading strategy, I'm not saying there's one best strategy everyone should use. I'm saying you need to pick one that makes sense to you, that fits your personality and your lifestyle, that you can see yourself executing for years. And then you need to stop looking. You need to close that folder. You need to commit. And you need to stay committed through the times when it doesn't feel good. Because the times when it doesn't feel good, those are the times when you're building the psychological muscle that separates professional traders from perpetual students. Those are the times when you're proving to yourself that you can be trusted, that you won't abandon ship at the first sign of trouble, that you're serious about this. And something interesting happens when other traders see you're not searching anymore. They get curious. They ask how you stay so focused, how you resist the temptation to try new things, and the answer is simple. You're not resisting anything. You're not fighting some urge to switch strategies. You've just accepted that this is your path. This is how you trade, and there's a deep peace that comes from that acceptance. The traders who struggle the most are the ones who are always negotiating with themselves. Always. Wondering if they should be doing something different. Always keeping one eye on what others are doing. They never fully commit to anything because they're afraid of commitment. They're afraid that if they commit and it doesn't work out, they'll have wasted time. But what they don't realize is that by never committing, they're guaranteeing they'll waste time. Because you can't become excellent at something you only do halfway. Excellence requires focus. It requires saying no to distractions. It requires the discipline to do the same thing when it's working and when it's not, when it's exciting and when it's boring, when you feel confident and when you feel doubt. And if you can develop that discipline around one strategy, you're not just becoming a better trader. You're becoming a different kind of person, someone who finishes what they start, someone who can be counted on, someone who doesn't quit when things get hard. This is what's actually at stake when you keep switching strategies. It's not just about trading results. It's about who you're becoming through this process. Are you becoming someone who commits and perseveres? Or someone who constantly starts over whenever things don't go perfectly? The market is just reflecting back to you what you're practicing in yourself. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. You're thinking about that one trader you saw who uses multiple strategies for different market conditions. And you're wondering if I'm saying that's wrong. Here's what I'll tell you. There are traders who can successfully manage multiple approaches, but they didn't start that way. They mastered one thing first. They built their foundation. They developed the discipline and the psychological skills through deep commitment to a single method. And only then, from a place of true competence, did they begin to add additional tools. The problem is, most traders want to skip that foundation phase. They want to be the person using multiple strategies before they've mastered even one. And so, they end up as a trader who knows a little about everything but has expertise in nothing. They're constantly switching between approaches they've never fully developed, wondering why they're not making progress. If you want to eventually trade multiple strategies, that's fine, but you have to earn that complexity. You have to prove to yourself first that you can commit to one thing and make it work. That you can stay consistent through different market conditions. That you won't abandon something just because it's not performing right now. And once you've done that, once you've built that foundation of discipline and self-trust, then you can consider expanding, but not before. For most traders, though, one strategy is enough, more than enough. Because what they're really after isn't variety in their methods. It's consistency in their results. And consistency comes from depth, from repetition, from knowing one approach so well that executing it becomes second nature. It comes from removing the internal debate about what to do and just doing what you've trained yourself to do. This is the freedom that comes from committing to one strategy. The freedom from constant the freedom from doubt. The freedom from FOMO. You're not trying to catch every move. You're not trying to trade like everyone else. You're just waiting for your setup, taking it when it appears, and managing it according to your rules. And if it doesn't appear, you wait. And if it loses, you take the next one. There's a rhythm to it that becomes almost meditative once you stop fighting it. And over time, something beautiful happens. You stop seeing other strategies as opportunities you're missing. You stop feeling envious when another trader talks about their winning trades from a different approach because you're secure in your own method. You know what it can do. You know it works. You know that if you keep showing up and executing it properly, you'll get your results. Maybe not today, maybe not this week, but over time, over enough trades, your edge will express itself. This is the mindset shift that changes everything. Moving from I need to find the right strategy to I need to execute my strategy correctly. Moving from external searching to internal discipline. Moving from hope that the next method will save you to trust that you can make this method work. And that shift doesn't happen because you finally found the perfect strategy. It happens because you decided to stop searching and start committing. So if you're sitting there right now, looking at that folder full of strategies, feeling overwhelmed and confused about which one to use or whether you should be trying something new, I want you to consider something. What if the answer isn't in that folder at all? What if the answer is to close it? Pick one thing that makes sense to you and commit to it completely for the next year. No looking for better methods. No comparing yourself to others. No switching when you hit a rough patch. Just you and your strategy. Working through every market condition together. Learning its strengths and limitations. Building your skill and your trust. What if the thing you've been searching for isn't a better strategy, but the courage to commit to the one you already have? What if your whole problem isn't that you don't know enough, but that you've never stayed anywhere long enough to truly know anything? What if the breakthrough you're looking for comes not from finding something new, but from finally going deep with something you already understand? These are questions worth sitting with, because the answer to your struggle might not be more information. It might be less searching and more staying, less collecting and more practicing, less hoping the next thing will be different and more making this thing work. You only need one trading strategy, not because other strategies don't work, not because there's only one way to succeed, but because commitment is what transforms knowledge into skill. Because focus is what separates mastery from dabbling. Because trust in yourself is built through keeping promises to yourself, especially when it's hard. And because, at the end of the day, trading isn't really about strategies at all. It's about who you're willing to become in order to make any strategy work. And the person who can make one strategy work can make any strategy work. Because they've developed the discipline, the patience, the trust, and the commitment that success requires. They've stopped looking outside themselves for the answer and started building it inside themselves. And once you build that, once you have that foundation, the specific strategy becomes almost secondary. Because you'll have something more valuable than any method. You'll have the ability to commit, to persist, and to trust yourself through uncertainty, and that ability will serve you not just in trading, but in everything you do. Thanks for listening. If this resonated with you, feel free to like this video and subscribe to the channel. For more content on trading psychology, drop a comment below and let me know what part hit home for you. I'll see you in the next one.